Hello, this is a video walkthrough in relation to the webinar that was given this week on Project Online. We ran into a problem related to the task parameters, and I just want to help you get beyond that while we fix that problem. So I will be walking you through how to do everything we talked about in the webinar directly in PowerApps to make sure that you understand the functions and the formulas that are needed to do this in your own world today. So I'm going to start again by showing you that I do have an intake form. My intake form is in Project Online in a Project Innovation Hub. Intake forms can be in any SharePoint list in Project Online. It doesn't have to be in this hub, but that definitely makes it easy for me to customize that form in the hub. So what I will do to basically start over is I will just go into the list settings and cancel the form that is in there just by clicking on use the default SharePoint form. At that point, I can decide if I want to delete the form that we had made before or keep it for later. I'm going to go ahead and delete it. And now I'm back to using the default form because at the webinar, we were using a customized form. And so if I click on this and say edit, you'll see that it is the default form. Now, this kind of threw me as well, and I had forgotten about it. Project Online, depending on which version you have in your tenant, doesn't have that same modern experience as other SharePoint sites will have. And so that's why this kind of looks like it's kicking into classic view. But don't worry, we're not going to use this form anyway. Now, what I did add to this form is I added an estimated start date for the project, and I added a field for the project ID, which we can push back from PowerApps once we've created the project. This way, if we want to create relational lists on this site about that project, we can use that project ID field. Okay, so I'm going to cancel. That's totally optional, though. You don't need to add anything or provide a place for the project ID in Project Online. That's just something I do in order to facilitate things I might do later, right? But totally not necessary. And I'll just tell you about these things just as a tip. All right. The other thing you want to keep in mind is that Project Online, of course, is consolidating all of your projects into a portfolio. And the prioritization of this portfolio is driven by the business drivers and or the person that's approving the project. Each project actually gets tagged as to how well it aligns with the business drivers. And this is what is so powerful about Project Online. It's what I love most about it, is that it helps you in prioritizing what needs to be done. And I have used it in other scenarios, not just for managing projects, but for managing anything where you want to map that thing against your business drivers. It's a really great tool for that. All right, so enough of Project Online, because this is not a Project Online discussion. This is a PowerApps discussion. We're directly above your intake form. Let's go ahead and choose Customize Forms. And what this will do is enable us to have a function that I really love called SharePoint integrations, where the integration is specifically about the list item. And since we're going to be creating projects directly from this list item, then Customize Forms is really the perfect thing to use. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Customize Forms, which is going to open us up into the canvas as normal, but it's going to focus on that single page form. Now, of course, we can always add additional forms, and we can even add galleries and things to Customize Forms, but it prepares us for simple edits to the form. And we can get as complex as our creativity allows us to get, but we want to make it easy for you to customize forms, and so we keep it simple when we build this app for you. So just going to give it a minute to load, and then we can get started. Looks like we're just about there. All right, so now I don't actually need this right now, but I do want to show you that it is helpful I can click on this. It'll open up a panel. And let's go ahead and use it since it was so nice to open it up for me. I'm going to get rid of any fields that I don't want on this form. I really want this form pretty simple for the person who is going to be filling it out. And also to kind of speed up the presentation, I might have less on this form today. Okay. Okay, so now we have that information on the form. I'm very happy about it. We can maybe, I don't even think we need to wrap the columns. They can stay as they are. But if you want to wrap them, you can change it to a 2 wrapping. And then what you'll see back here, I'll zoom in. You can see that I can span columns if I want to. I usually do that for title and description. And the last thing that I like to do with description is also set that field to multi-line text so that people know that it can have more than one line of text. All right, so now my form is basically ready. I'm going to highlight the form again. If you ever want to get that panel back, after you've done some things, you would need to select the form in the left navigation, and then you can go over to the right and click on the name of the data source, and it will pop up that panel again, okay? But in order to get this panel to come back up again, you actually need to select the form in the object browser. All right, I'm going to adjust this form so that it has room for some buttons. So I'm going to scroll that back up. And now you'll see that my form has room for buttons. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit a button. I'm going to create a button here on my form, and I'm just going to use the text property of this button to name it Create Project. Okay, and that will be our Create Project button. When you're setting up buttons like this, there needs to be a saved item on SharePoint before we can create a project. So one thing I didn't do in the webinar that we can do today, just to show you, is we want to hide this button unless this is in edit mode. So if it's a new form, we don't want to see this button. So the easy way to do that is to do if SharePoint form, which is the name of the form, mode equals new. Then we want to say false. Don't show this. Visible is false. I'm in the visible property. Otherwise, visible is true, which will make sure this button is only seen in edit mode. And if you don't want to bounce back to SharePoint to try this, all you have to do is highlight the form, and then over here in the default mode area, change it to new, and you'll see the button disappears. And that's exactly what I want. So now that you have that button there, we want this button to create a new project, right? Based on what's up here. And in the presentation, all we did was use the Project Online connector to do that, because we want to create that project in Project Online. So I just want to do one thing before I continue. I'm just going to rename my button Create Project, because we will have some other buttons on this form. Button Create Project, right? And then we have our Create Project button. Now, I'm going to store the URL of my site in a variable. And what this does is it does a couple things for me. One, if I need to change the site URL later, I can in just one place, as opposed to having to change it in every single formula. And two, if I want to share this app with somebody, well, actually, it's the same reason, so to speak. Sorry, I need this to be true. I made a mistake and picked the wrong property. So let me just go back and pick the on-visible property of the screen. And what I want to put here is my project site address. So I'm going to do project site. That's my variable. I'm going to wrap it in a global variable, which is set, right? The set function here. If you click in there, you can see it needs a variable name and then a value. The value is that URL in quotes. And so this is my way of storing the URL to my Project Online site. And I'll basically need that quite a bit when I'm using these functions. And so I'm storing it there to make it easier. And plus, it'll be easier to read as well. FYI, when you make global variables, they will show up in your list of variables so that you can always check what your variables are. Even after someone else does an app, you can go look and see what the variables were. And, you know, for those of you that are new, variables are just kind of like buckets that we can use to hold stuff. And then we can pour that bucket on top of another function. So we can use that information that's in that variable somewhere else because it's contained in there. There's a value inside a variable. And that's, in this case, just the site URL. All right. So now we need the Project Online connector to be part of this, because if we look at the data sources, SharePoint gave us our SharePoint site, which is awesome. We don't have to think about that. It's built into the Forms integration. But we need to add our Project Online connector. And just remember that when you're working with SharePoint Forms, you can add any number of connectors you need. And that's what we call data mashup, right? Why not extend your forms or your apps on SharePoint to include data that's relevant to the user? Okay, in this case, we're giving the admins the capability of creating a project in Project Online, and we don't even have to teach them how to go do that in Project Online. We're kind of doing that for them, all right? And so now that we have the connector there, we have all of these formulas available. So I'm going to go to the onSelect property, which is the property we always use when it comes to buttons or actions. Anytime we want to click on something or tap on something and something else happens, that's what we use, the onSelect function. And now you'll see when I start typing Project Online, all of the functionality that has been given to us. All right. And we're going to, in this video, do everything except for create resource. All right. It's the only one we don't have time for today. If you want it, though, please post somewhere, either on Twitter or in the community, that you want it. Put it under this description, and we'll do that another day. So what we want to do first is we want to create a project. So when I hit dot, this gives me all those methods, and I can choose that. Now it wants to know, if we look at the syntax up here, what is the site URL? It is project site, which is the global variable that we set. And notice how it changed color to let us know it recognizes that. Then I'm going to hit the comma, and it wants the name of the project. And I'm actually going to use the name that is right here at the top. So I'm going to reference the list item. And I do that using SharePoint integration. So SharePoint integration. What's selected on SharePoint is my question. And then let's use the title from that list item as our project title. All right. Of course, the person doing this would be able to go in there and change the title if they wanted to, just by changing what's in the title field. All right. Now, one thing you may want to add is other details about this project. Otherwise, it kind of relies on defaults. So if I hit comma and open, and you'll notice that right away when I hit the comma, I see these parameters, description and start. So let's use those. First, I'm going to just make a shift enter to get on the second line. I've gotten a couple of questions about that. And then on the description, I'm going to put in the description, and I'm also going to get that start. So I want both of those. And I'm going to close the squiggly. So you see, I'm going to use the two parameters, description and start date time. Okay. And if I get confused at any time, I can just look at the IntelliSense that occurs when I type. All right, so I'm going to hit return here, and let's just do description first. That way you can see how easy this is. Now, for the description, I'm going to go ahead and use the description that's on SharePoint as well. So again, I'm going to do SharePoint integration dot selected, and then I have a description column. It's not exactly called, sorry, I meant to do SharePoint integration. and I want the selected, and I want the description. And if you start typing, if you don't know the exact what is the name of your field, it will give you all the fields that contain what you're typing. So I'm going to take product description, and then I'm going to notice that when I hit the comma, now I get what else is there, and I'm going to use start. And then on start, I'm going to do the start field, which is estimated start in my SharePoint integration again. So SharePoint integration, sorry, I keep hitting tab too soon. Dart selected dot start, right? And you'll see that I have an estimated start date here. All right. Remember to close your squiggly and to close your end quote, right? So basically, and I hope you can see this well, I got a lot of questions on this formula, so I want to make sure, I got quite a few, not a lot, but quite a few questions on how this formula is formatted. I got more questions on task, which we're going to do next, okay? So this is actually the formula that will create a project. But here's what is important about this. I want to grab the project ID that comes from this. And we talked about this yesterday. If you use the deck that will be attached to both the webinar and here, you'll see that we have help in our documentation on Project Online. And if you look here, you'll see that when I create a new project here, it is going to return a body. And it gives me a link to what's in that body. If I click on that, these are all the things that actually get kicked back when we create a new project. And what I want to grab is this project ID right here. Now I can use any of it in a variable or something else, but in order to grab this, right, in order to kind of get it, I need to, I'm going to go back to my app. I need to put that in a variable. So I'm just going to put a set variable here, beginning and end quote, and give this variable a name, which I'm going to call project ID response. And now this variable right here will give me back the ID of the project and all the other body items that you saw there. Okay, so now that I have that exactly the way I want it, let's save it and test it. So we're going to go back to SharePoint, save and publish. Which will take us back to SharePoint because we're using customized forms. And now basically I'm going to create a new item. And you'll notice when I create this new item, we don't see that button. And that's because it needs to be saved first, right? Project name, my project description, my budget cost, which will not be passed, but we want to grab that information. And then we're going to estimate it on March 22nd, all right? And now we're going to save that. Now, if I go back into that form, it's now in edit mode, we see the button, okay? So we go to the project center. Let's check and see if there's any projects named project name. I think I point this out in the webinar, that if you have a project name that matches, then because it matches, you'll get an error message back from the server. So there is no project called project name. I can refresh to make sure. And you can see that if I scroll down, there's nothing called project name. You can definitely add some data validation on this, but we won't have time in this video. And then what I'm going to do is go back to PowerApps. What did I do? My app, it's here. It is in Chrome. All right, go back to my Power App. What happened? Oh, I'm still on the list. Sorry. I'm in my list and I'm going to go ahead and click create project. Now, obviously I don't need to be an app maker to do this, because the app maker has already done their job, or the forms designer has already done their job and provided the form with the functionality needed. And that's why I could go back to SharePoint and just create my project without needing to go into any edit mode in PowerApps. The little dots at the top of the screen give me an indication that it's working, so I don't mind seeing them. We are working to make this a faster experience, but that's what they mean. When they stop, the work has been done. So I can either cancel out of this or save, because I haven't changed anything on the form itself. If I go back to, because one of the things that I would like to do is make sure that we can grab the project ID for this. And so I want to get the project ID into the SharePoint list as well. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to highlight my form, right, because it has access to that field that I added. And I'm going to show that project ID field so that it is showing on this card. And then I'm going to select the value control in that. And I'll just zoom in so you can see what's going on here. I can select the value of the project ID. And then I can default this to our variable. So if I go to advanced, I can unlock this field and then set the default value to our project ID response .id. This makes sure that when we submit this form, this ID goes as well. Now, right now we're going to go back to SharePoint and we'll see this work. You could also patch it, and so I included a patch statement because you might want to patch it to other lists, and so I include in the notes a patch statement in case you want to patch it somewhere else, or you want to patch it here at the same time that you create the project. You can do that as well. Okay, let's test this. We're going to choose a new project, and let's call this PowerApps demo project, and then we can put as much as we want to put in our description. It holds a lot of lines, right? By the way, if you know that this will scroll if you add more than what is visible, just thought I'd show you that. And then risk, and then medium, and then let's do an estimated start of April 18th. And then I'll click OK. And now I'm going to save this. Oh, I have a field that needs a value. So I put too much in this field, and notice I got a server-side error message. An error message that lets me know that the value must be less than 25. So that's just built in with the integration. We will get error messages that apply to the SharePoint schema. So I'll make that less and hit save. And now we have that added to our SharePoint list. Let's click Create Project. I don't think we had this, right? Because we were in new mode. So let's click Create Project. The project will be created. We'll save. And then let's go back to the Project Center and make sure it's there. And it is. There's our PowerApps demo project, created at 12:19, which is right now. Okay. And then if we go back to our intake form, I just want to refresh this because what we've also captured, I think I showed you this already, is the ID of the project. And that's something we can use to create a relationship with other lists about that project, okay? When we're using PowerApps, of course. So That's basically how you create a project. But what if I want to create a task? Okay, so let's modify this even more. I'm going to go into my form and do customize. And we're going to add a few fields right here on this form. I think if this was a real application, I would probably have a separate list for them to create tasks in. Now, one thing I did at the Data Insights conference when I did that demo for Project Online is I made template lists, which means I took a list and said, okay, every SharePoint project needs these tasks to be done, and these need to take this long, and they need to have this type of resource. And I set up these different types of lists so that I could build the whole schedule based on project type. And so you can go look at that. Just do a search for Data Insights in Project Online, and I think it'll come up without a problem. Otherwise, I'll put the link at the description as well. In this case, I'm just going to add a single task, all right? So basically, you'll see that I can add any task. Okay, so in talking with Samir, I want to kind of show you a little bit about this problem here, because we have a little bit of a problem with the creating of a task. And I will show you this in more detail. But these are the parameters that we talked about being missing. And I think I figured out how to get them out of the docs. All right. So again, I have a link to the docs in the attachment that you'll have with the webinar and with this video. And in here, if we go to create task, the parameter, this is the name of the parameter. What we'll use in PowerApps is the key. And so there are the keys in the doc that you can go and dig up. And yesterday I said I didn't have these, but I just didn't look down at the keys. And so that's my bad. We have the keys here. You shouldn't have to look for the key because that should be in PowerApps. And again, I promise you we'll get that fixed. But in the meantime, the key will be what you'll use to find out what should I type in PowerApps. And I'm just going to show you this. So I'm going to select this button and I'm going to copy and then paste. And then I'm going to rename my pasted copy and call it button create task. Okay. Now I will replace all of this stuff up here with the task creation. So Project Online is my connector, and then I want create task, and then we want the project ID, which is the is actually in SharePoint integration, right? Because we've saved that project ID here. And this was a problem that a couple of you ran into yesterday, because if you open the form in edit mode, that variable has been reset. And so we needed to push the project ID into SharePoint so that at any time after that, they would still be able to use that project ID to create a task. All right. So we're going to actually say selected, and then we've got that project ID there. And then it wants the site URL, which is project site, which is that variable it's still working because it's set on visible. And then we want the parameters. And again, we don't show them to you here. And that's something the PowerApps team has to fix so that you don't have to go and look this up. But I'm just going to open those two brackets and then go back to my documentation, Project Online directly. And then I would go to create task, and I would see those parameters, site URL, project ID, and then for the task, I would get optional parameters like notes, start date, and duration, okay? And their names are note, start, and duration. Now, one other thing I wanted to show you that I learned in kind of playing around with finding out parameters that are missing, I'm going to insert some controls so that I can put what my task is going to be. So I'm going to add a text input control. bring that down here. And this is going to be my task name. Task name. And I'm going to set the default to blank. Right, and I could definitely put this on a different screen. And I'm going to put some hint text in here so that they know what to type. Okay, and now I'm going to copy that and paste it. And again, I have to zoom so it pastes at the top. I'm going to rename this task notes. Then I'm going to copy and paste that. Well, actually, I want to also change the hint text to enter the task notes. Then I'm going to copy and paste that. Move it down there, make it smaller, and call this task duration, because this is just going to be a single number for the number of days. And the hint text on this one is enter the task duration in days. Okay, and then finally I'm going to insert a date time picker. Move that down and rename that task start. This is the start date. Okay. All right, now I can zoom back in because I finished all my pasting. And I'm going to just highlight each of these with control click, well, except for the date, and align them left. And I'm going to distribute them vertically so that they all have equal space between them. Totally can do this a whole lot better, make it look a lot better and all of that. But since this isn't the purpose of this presentation, to kind of help you design apps, I am just going to keep it simple. I'm just going to put a box around this, kind of making a form here just for fun, because I want you to understand exactly what's going on in every case. All right, so that's my task. I'm going to move the button down closer to that area. And now I can finish my parameters, all right? Because I have fields that have what it needs, right? So task name is task name dot text. So that's our task name, whatever's in task name. For the notes, we want whatever's in task notes. For the start, we want whatever is in that task start date picker. In this case, I have to say selected date, right? And then finally, the duration. Now, that needs to be a number, so I'm going to wrap it in a value function, which will turn the text into a number, and we'll just put task duration dot text, okay? And now let's look at this all up and see what's create task. Now, notice here, it says if something is invalid, it is this right here, because it's not task name, it's name. And so the error message will help you go and check when you're not sure what these keys or parameters are called, and maybe you go to the documentation and maybe you mistype one of them. You can go ahead and just use that to help you create the task. All right. Now, of course, when you're creating a task, you'll also need to first check out the project and then check it back in and publish it. In this case, we did find a problem with create tasks, and there were 2 people that emailed me and let me know that that was a problem. So what I'm going to do is not use PowerApps to create this task, even though this formula is correct. You can take note of it until we figure out why it isn't working with a checkout and publish. I suggest you just use Flow, and I'm about to show you how to use Flow right now. So I'm going to delete all of that, save it in my OneNote somewhere, right, which I've already done. And now I'm going to create the flow that's going to create the task, all right? One thing that's really bothering me is that I've got this on the bottom of the screen kind of messy. Notice that I can select multiple controls, kind of like I do in PowerPoint, to move all this up. And I'm also going to change the visible property on the Create Project button, because if there's a project ID, I don't want it to show. So in the visible property of this button, we already have, if it is SharePoint mode is new, false, right? But I'm going to add an or statement here, or, and that's just those, you can use the word or, sorry, or SharePoint integration dot selected dot project ID. Sorry, I'm going to do an is blank here. Is empty. Okay, so basically what I'm saying, if it's in new mode or the project ID is empty, sorry, is not empty, right? So I put the little not function in front of it. Is not empty, then don't show this control, otherwise do show this control. Okay, and that will keep that create project button from being clicked more than once. Right, so this means it's empty, right? So normally we would say is empty equals true, right? But what I'm basically saying is if it's not empty, so that's what I put that little not symbol, right? And now it's not empty, okay? And then that gives me the capability of having this a little bit higher on the screen and so forth, right? If I run this so you can see what it looks like, right? And I need to rename our task button. So button create task, let's give that text field of create task. And I think about there. So let's check our visibility on that create project button first. So let's go back to SharePoint, save and publish. And basically, you know, it's interesting. I am such an app maker and so not a marketing person that I kind of build these demos each time slightly different. So it's hard for me to, script my demos. And so in this case, I decided that I needed to hide that button during this demonstration, and that's kind of what happens. All right. So in this case, if I open this, I should not see the create project button, and I don't. Okay. But if I instead click new, I can't either because it's new, right? I'm actually kind of protecting people from trying to create the project twice, because if you try to create the same name twice on Project Online, it's going to kick back an error message. And I don't really want my users to see that error message. It's long with GUIDs and it looks kind of scary. So I don't want them to see it. So I want to protect them by hiding that button so that they don't try and do that again. On the other hand, they can create tasks as many times as they want, right? So I'm going to go in here, get zoomed up in here into create task. Now, of course, all the functionality down here related to the create task controls, I probably would give it the same visibility as our button in the case where it's a new form. So this would only be visible if this is in edit mode. And I might go ahead every time this button is pressed and reset these fields. And I'll show you how I do that, right? So I would just do reset, which I would spell correctly, and type the name of the fields in there, right? And what this does is if after they type, it clears the fields, so to speak, so that they don't have anything in them for the next try. Because actually they don't have to leave this form to go and create more tasks. Right? They can just keep adding tasks, right? And so I reset those controls so that they can. Now, is this the best practice? Maybe not. Maybe again, I would use a SharePoint list instead of this single form for doing everything. I might use this form for creating the project and use another form for creating the task. All right. So I'm going to copy this to my clipboard because we're about to make the flow and I don't want that to get in the way. Right. So I just cut it out. And now let's go ahead and make our flow. Really easy to do. We're going to go into flows and click create a new flow, which will bring us into flow, which is also one of my favorite products at Microsoft. I'm just going to do create new PWA task, right? That's what I'm going to name this. It's triggered by a button in PowerApps, and so it fills that in for you. And I'm going to hit new step and add an action. Now, you'd have to know Project Online to realize that you cannot add a task to a project until it is checked out. So the first thing we will do is check it out. And it wants to know the root site. Go ahead and let it ask in PowerApps. Now, what I'm doing when I'm clicking ask in PowerApps is I'm creating parameters for my PowerApps app dynamically. So try and do this in the order that it should be done, which means we're checking out the project first, and then we'll have those variables. Because if we need those variables again, we can reuse them, right? We don't have to keep asking in PowerApps, right? So now I'm going to add another step, which is the create the project, which is create the task. So I will go into create new task, and now it's asking for the root site, and this is what I mean. Since we've already done this, we have a variable that it can reuse. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. Then I'm going to use the project ID. My task name, I'm going to have it ask PowerApps for the name, the notes, the start date, and the duration. Okay, and now you can see we have these variables here for that, these parameters here for that. And then after you make a task in Project Online, you need to publish it. So I'm going to click on New Step Action. And I probably could type the word publish to get there faster. It depends on where, though. I think my search will get to a lot of different things that it's publishing. So I could type publish, and then I can find that Project Online task without having to type Project Online and then searching through all of them. So you have lots of choices as to how you search in Flow. I'm going to click on that. And now, again, I'm going to reuse the root site URL variable and the project ID variable. Okay. And then I say create flow. And that's basically it. Now, if I wanted to update that SharePoint list, at this time, I could add another action to do that. If I wanted to notify someone with a push notification, I could do that. So because I'm in Flow, I can go ahead and keep going until I'm happy with what I want to happen when I press this button. But do understand that it will happen when you press the button. Each thing will occur in sequence. If you want to trap any errors, you can go in here and you can say configure a run out and trap any errors, right, that you want to trap. And once you trap those errors, you can actually create an if-then statement as to what happens in those errors, right? We'll talk about that another day. I'm going to create a flow just by clicking that and hit done. Okay, so now my flow is successfully connected and created. Understand that it requires the connection to Project Online as well. So in the case of PowerApps, big difference here. In the case of PowerApps, the user would need to have a license for Project Online. In the case of Flow, however, you can actually have the action be controlled by a different account, right? So now that that's created, I'm going to go ahead back to my Power App. You'll notice that our flow is visible there. We click on it to add it, and it'll say it's adding it. Now, not only will it add it for us, but it will start us off up here with our function, right? And the syntax tells us step by step what we need. So we need the URL, which is the project site. We need the project ID, which is SharePoint integration dot selected dot project ID. We need the task name, which is in task name control. I'm sorry, task name dot text control. Then we need task notes, which is in task notes dot text control. Then we need the task start date, which is in task start date. And notice how important it is to have your fields properly named so that this is really easy to do and you're not kind of trying to figure it out as you go, as you see me do sometime. Now with the date, that isn't text though. That is selected date because that's a date picker. And then with the duration, it's task duration. I clicked away by accident. Duration dot text. Now, duration is a number, so I need to wrap that in a value field to make sure it goes over as a number, okay? And that is the flow that's going to do this magic for us, all right? Now, remember, the flow checked out the project before it makes the task. Now, you would get an error message on this flow if the project is already checked out, right? So you might want to add in some data validation again to make sure that things aren't done in the wrong order. So let's try this. So I'm going to actually save it first. And if I wanted to get some of that body back, so again, going back into Project Online, let's look at Create Task. And then from Create Task, you'll see there is a return called New Task. If I wanted to get any of the new task information back, which I don't see much at all, like one thing you might want is to get back details about that task. We don't have that in here right now, so you might want to request that in the idea forum. All right, so that's why I'm not wrapping this one in a set statement, because there's not really anything that I want to get back right now, or that I can get back right now. All right, so then I'm going to go back to SharePoint, save and publish. All right, and let's open that project that we created, which was the PowerApps demo project, which I think we did a minute ago. Let me just make sure. What happens to your memories as you grow older? I have no idea, guys. So we go into, here it is, PowerApps demo project. I believe that's it right there. So just making sure I'm in the right one. And here we are. So now I'm going to create a new task. I've got some kind of hover there that I want to get rid of. So let's customize. I've set that square in some way that I need to fix. So let's just fix it together. Stuff like that happens and I don't get frustrated. You know, I just go back and fix it. What can you do? We make mistakes. I can love PowerApps because I'm a person who likes attention to detail. So this rectangle might need to go to the back. So I'll send it to the back. Let's try it again. There shouldn't be any on select on it. I don't see one. Okay. And let's go back down to there and open this form. Okay. There is an on hover on that square. We can totally change that on hover property or get rid of that square altogether. So let's call this task squareless task. And let's enter the notes. These are my notes. Now I use hint text. You can definitely put like headers or whatever you'd like to do in front or around your fields. I just wanted to have less controls in this case and make it 12 days in duration. And I'm going to start it on April 2nd. Okay, with all that done, I'm going to create the task. You should see, I should have went up there so you could see the little ants crawling. We shouldn't have a problem here. Let's go into PowerApps demos. Sometimes if I don't notice, so you see how it's working on checking in right here? This can happen because Flow is working at the pace it's working, which is fast, but can sometimes require, steps to get through a queue. So it will queue if things start to back up, right? So I can just say okay to that because it's letting me know something's happening right now. And if we go to our flow, let's see if we can peek at that. This is the button we just made. You notice, is that the one we just made? Was it this one? I think this is the one we just made. And I'm going to refresh this. I have 2 connections that need fixing, but I won't worry about them right now. Notice that I succeeded a minute ago. If I click on that success on the thing, you'll see I have all my check boxes. You can see that I can look at the data to see what happened, right? What happened and all the JSON behind that. I can see all of the results in here. I often use Flow for troubleshooting, and I mentioned that in the webinar, but you really have to run it in order, run the flow. It's not going to be like in the UI of creating a flow, which was what I was trying to do, but I got confused. It's when you run it that you start to see all the different values and stuff that actually occur when the flow runs. And Stephen did a great presentation at Ignite on advanced functions and formulas and expressions and things like that. Related to flow, and so you should look at his Ignite presentation. I'll put a link in there. But getting to understand these inputs and outputs, I find are really helpful when you're building solutions to kind of go back and see what happened. Now, if I go back to here, I can close this. I did not patch that task anywhere else. In my mind, it was sufficient that it went to Project Online, but you might decide to add a patch statement that might patch it to a list where you archive all the tasks that were ever done. So you can see, I don't know what you might want to see, but you could also add it to another list. But I'm happy with that task just being in the Project Center. So if we go to that project, which is this one, see, we don't get that message anymore. If I go to the schedule, you'll see that we have our task. And it is starting at the day we said it should start, and it has the duration that we said it should have in days, and there it is. And so you could imagine how cool it would be to basically generate your entire schedule using Flow process automation and using PowerApps to help people basically not have to learn all of these different tools. I think us power users, we love learning tools. We enjoy figuring it out. I mean, I know you've heard me say fun too many times, but it's fun for us, but not for everybody. So for everybody else, we need to be the heroes and make these apps and these flows that do it for them, right? We just get the information we need for them, and it's all done for them, guys. So I hope this helps to clarify the webinar and to show you some tips, additional tips. One day I'm going to learn how to script a webinar, and it will be more planned. But I think you also learn a lot from me kind of showing you how I work, because I'm actually showing you the real way I work every day. And when I run into problems, exactly what I do. So let me know what you think. If you want another one on adding resources, let me know. I haven't seen that request very often. No one has asked me about that. So I didn't think it was really something we needed to worry about, but please tell me if I'm wrong. You guys have a great week, and I'll be talking to you at the next Friday Functions video, which will be coming up on Friday, where we actually have a challenge in that one. So go back and peek at the webinar. Towards the end, I give you a challenge. If you can solve that challenge by Friday before I post the answer, then you can win some fun swag. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.